In the last video I posted, if you missed it, by the way, I'll put it up right here so you can catch up. But we went over running back dart throws that you should be willing to take at the end of your draft. And in this video, we're going to be talking about wide receivers in the late rounds that you cannot afford to miss this year in 2024. Roll the intro. Starting us off, let's start with Las Vegas Raiders wide receiver Jakobi Meyers, who's ranked at wide receiver 59 currently on Underdog. Meyers finished as the wide receiver 24 last season, and although that had to do a lot with his 11 total touchdowns last season, we obviously can't expect those numbers to repeat themselves once again in 2024, but still considering that somebody who gets 100 targets is going to be a wide receiver 59 this year in fantasy, that to me is a value. Even if we were to take away all of Jakobi Meyers' rushing stats, which would be 24 yards and 2 touchdowns, and we even took away one of his 8 receiving touchdowns, we're left with 7 receiving touchdowns, no rushing touchdowns, and still a finish of wide receiver 30 if we took away all of those extra points that he got, which is still really impressive. To get a wide receiver late in the draft that is slated for 100 plus targets like he was last season, is readily available and hardly misses time, and is getting an upgrade at quarterback in his age 28 season, so we know this guy is not washed. He's not going to regress anytime soon, though he might not have the same amount of touchdowns as last season. And although we know, given as many seasons as he's played in the NFL, he's not a 1,000-yard receiver. And he doesn't have to be with Davante Adams across from him. But you know what he can do is be an important part of this offense with that upgrade at quarterback with Gardner Minshew. Not to mention, he has the capability and potential to throw touchdowns, run touchdowns, and catch touchdowns, as he did all 3 of those last season. Though they might not happen again, those players that just find their way onto the field are always going to be viable in fantasy football. Up next is the wide receiver 60. We're just going one tick under now. The Green Bay Packers wide receiver Dontayvion Wicks. Dontayvion Wicks solely gets the nod here as a dart throw we should be taking late rounds of fantasy due to the sheer fact that he is a freak athlete and can absolutely fly on the football field. I don't really think it's much of a discussion or a debate, but Jaden Reed is obviously a better wide receiver than Dontayvion Wicks. Currently at this moment, I would also say that Romeo Doubs is a better wide receiver than Dontayvion Wicks, but by the end or even the middle of this season, Dontayvion Wicks could pass Romeo Doubs and even potentially pass Jaden Reed if he were to get enough red zone looks and opportunities this year. Although Wicks was 89th amongst wide receivers in routes ran, he was 25th last season in target separation, 10th in route win rate, and he was 4th amongst all wide receivers in terms of his win rate against man coverage. So we know Dontayvion Wicks can absolutely fly, and there's no way you can contain him one-on-one. With the new look young Packers team that went to the NFC divisional round last season and unfortunately lost to the 49ers, these same Green Bay Packers could be an interesting team and maybe even a dangerous team in 2024, which only makes Dontayvion Wicks more appealing at his wide receiver 60 price point. Moving on to the third but not last wide receiver you should be taking a chance on in the later rounds, that would be Jahan Dotson of the Washington Commanders, who comes in at the wide receiver 64. And Jahan Dotson, given that he's only played 2 seasons in the league and they weren't even full seasons, especially in his rookie season, this is a tough player to kind of rank, and I feel like that's why he finds himself in this abyss of wide receiver 64. We don't know exactly yet what Jahan Dotson exactly will be in 2024, but we know that he's not the same guy who caught 7 touchdown passes his rookie season in 12 games. But we also know that over the course of a full season, he's also not the guy from last year that only caught 4 touchdowns on 49 receptions. This kind of reminds me of the career path of Jakobi Meyers, where we kept seeing no touchdowns, and then finally a surge of 14 receiving touchdowns over his last 2 seasons. Jahan Dotson feels like the mean will eventually settle itself out, and he won't be that 7 touchdown guy. He won't be that 4 touchdown guy. But you know what? If he lands himself right at like 5 touchdowns and could catch over 50, let's say 52, 54 passes, that's going to pan out to be way better than wide receiver 64. We also have to consider his statistics will go up from last season because the Commanders had one of the worst quarterback plays last season, and they're getting an upgrade in Jaden Daniels. Whether you think Jaden Daniels is going to be a Pro Bowler, going to be an MVP candidate, going to be a bust, whatever the case is, there's no doubt about it, he's better than Sam Howell. And given that information of that Jaden Daniels will improve the quarterback play that this Commanders offense sees, this team should have more life to them, and that means Jahan Dotson should have more fantasy value to him than wide receiver 64. Are you kidding me? And finally, of course, I saved the absolute best for last. Or maybe I didn't, because I just kind of went in order of how low and how good these guys were ranked. But coming in at wide receiver 67 is Ricky Pearsall of the San Francisco 49ers. And before I give any stats or thoughts and opinions on the wide receiver coming out of Florida, I'm getting a first-round drafted wide receiver 67. Sign me up for that every single day of the week. What Pearsall's ADP tells me is that these experts think that he's more of a Quentin Johnston than a Zay Flowers. And as we all know, Quentin Johnston, all-time bad rookie season. We would really be pressed if another first-round wide receiver had that much of a disappointment. If the 49ers, who have an elite offense, felt that they needed to add another wide receiver with a first-round pick, then we should all be adding this first-round wide receiver to our fantasy rosters as well. And I'm not going to lie, I do find it just a little sus that Brandon Ayuk all of a sudden hasn't said he's upset anymore, hasn't said he wants to come back to the 49ers, hasn't signed an extension with the 49ers. The media is kind of just keeping the trade talks to a hush right now. And we don't know what that's going to look like in August. We don't know what that's going to look like in September. We don't even know if by October Ayuk would be traded or not. This ADP of wide receiver 67 clearly to me says that the experts think that Brandon Ayuk is going to play 17 games for the 49ers this season, which I don't believe because he's still yet to get his contract extension that he's looking for. The minute Brandon Ayuk gets traded for, it could be anything. It doesn't even have to be for good value back. Ricky Pearsall is going to go from wide receiver 67 to like wide receiver 40. And you're going to miss that jump and you're going to have FOMO because you didn't want to take somebody who was good enough to be drafted as a first round wide receiver with one of your last picks of a fantasy draft. We need to take advantage of Pearsall's really cheap ADP right now and just keep hammering the buy button on that. You got 2 picks left in your underdog draft. You don't know what to take. You don't know what to fill out. Just grab Ricky Pearsall and hope for the best. The moment Brandon Ayuk gets traded, or not saying I want this to happen, but the moment that Deebo Samuel goes down with an injury, unfortunately, you're going to have a great wide receiver, and it only costed you a dart throw, a late round draft pick. Costs you nothing to get this guy. All it takes is it's a random 1 o'clock in the afternoon or 11 a.m. in the morning, and you check your phone and you get that notification that Brandon Ayuk was traded somewhere, and Ricky Pearsall becomes the biggest steal in the draft just because you were willing to take that risk. But that's all I have for you guys today. If you enjoyed this video or if you like fantasy football content, feel free to like the video. Feel free to throw me a subscribe. I finally got that one right. If you're a viewer and you watch all my videos, I can never point to the subscribe button. I always get it wrong. but we're going to point right down here. If you made it this far into the video, I just want to say thank you. And comment bananas so that I know that you stuck around and watched this entire video and that you're a real one. But my name is Turtle. I'm signing out, and I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day. Peace.